as the world continues to wait with bated breath for Israel's strong expected counterstrike into Iran based on the 180 missiles that landed in Israel a few days back. We are also seeing continued signs that Israel is not slowing down on any of its other fronts, and they're continuing to pour more and more troops into southern Lebanon. And as you can see on the screen there, they're continuing to pummel exceptional firepower into Beirut, into the city. We have no earthly idea how many civilian casualties this is causing, but it's just got to be horrific. And to try and talk about, unpack some of this today, we have one of the best voices on the Middle East, somebody who's been on the ground in this region a lot, and that's Matthew Ho, former State Department official, former combat Marine, and just all around great guy. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Hi, Danny. Good to see you.
Listen, I want to even before we get into a lot of this, Gary, if you could show those clips you were just showing again, because something really kind of sticks out to me that I think is important to point out here. These are images. I think some of these are just from yesterday or maybe even last night against Beirut. But I mean, you've been seeing these just going nonstop all over the place. And this next one here that's going to come up in a second. It looks more like something from a movie set, something that someone just created or a video game. Yeah, that one right there. Right. This is the city, the capital city of Lebanon, just being pummeled and just devastated. And it seems to me that it's Netanyahu's boast several months back where he said, if this keeps going, he's going to turn Beirut into the next Gaza. And now it looks like he's making good on this. And I just think it's important to point out that so far, at least in the April and in this last Iranian strike into Israel, they only attacked military targets. There was no cities that were attacked. And so none of this has been going on. And I just think it's really troubling that Israel seems to have no problem gutting cities.
Right. And I'm not certain, but I do know that the Israeli strikes over this weekend hit an oxygen tank manufacturing plant. And that one really massive blast, the really large fireball, and then the fires that resulted may have been from that. So the Israelis intentionally striking facilities that they know will cause extreme damage, right? You drop a bomb on an oxygen tank manufacturing plant, you're going to get a pretty big blast. You're going to get a pretty big fireball. The Israelis know this. Their targeting, too, has been consistent with what they've done in Gaza, wherein they have been deliberately attacking healthcare facilities. I mean, dozens and dozens of first responders, paramedics, doctors, nurses have been killed already in deliberate attacks. So there is just not the wide, broad destruction we're seeing, Danny, right? But there's also this pinpoint targeting, pinpoint killing of key people in Lebanese society in order to make it even worse. And you're exactly right. Up until a few weeks ago, we saw Israel and Hezbollah responding primarily at each other at military targets. Now, certainly they would hit civilian targets from time to time, but it was an engagement between the two forces primarily. And now we see exactly what you said, Israel making good on its promises going back to 2023, that they will make Beirut look like Gaza City.
And yeah, and we're starting to see that. And this is going to get into what we want to talk about here really throughout this episode about the what next, what is the objective, what is the attainable objective, political or military or otherwise. And I'm having a hard time coming up with any end state on any of these fronts, and there's several of them. But first of all, I want to show you something that was just earlier today, this being the 7th of October, 2024, the exact 1 year mark of the Hamas terror attack against Israel, which was at least the proximal cause of this regional explosion so far. Although, as we've talked about, history hardly started on October 7th of last year, but it certainly lit the fuse of this what's now engulfing the entire region. The United States sent 2 U.S. senators. On the surface, they're called Graham and Blumenthal, but I think you might be more appropriate. I'm just going to have to warn you, this is going to be hard to listen to because they should be calling them Senator Orwell and Senator Orwell, because that's about as close as it comes to crazy speak and the twisting of the English language that I can imagine. See if you can pick up on it. Watch this.
This day of commemoration of October 7th, it was the worst attack on the Jewish people since the Holocaust, but unlike the Holocaust, we fight back. And we're fighting like lions with the support of the American government, the American people.
Whatever it takes to get your people back in their homes, you do. To my friends in France, you got this ass backwards. You should be doubling down on helping Israel because the people that want to destroy Israel also want to destroy the French people. I get that. He gets that. You're fighting our fight. We're going to help you with your military needs. The Twin Towers fell not because of a hurricane, because radical Islamic terrorists killed 3,000 of us on a single day. And they would kill all of us if they could. If Iran ever got a nuclear weapon, they would use it. The question would be, who would they use it against first? Me, you, Saudi Arabia? We can never let that happen. So we're going to help you.
So if you can destroy everyone in the region, that's cool because they're coming after France. Well, I mean, where did that come from?
I don't know. I mean, just to Netanyahu's comments there about how, like, unlike in the Holocaust, we fought back. I mean, that's absolutely shameful and disgusting and revolting. Jewish members of Jewish networks throughout Europe were the backbone of the resistance to the Nazi occupations, whether it was in France, whether it was throughout Eastern Europe, of course, especially the Warsaw Ghetto, the most infamous. But the idea that the Jewish people didn't fight back in some form or way is inaccurate. Certainly, many of them were brought onto the trains into the
and
camp.
you know, and I think to me it's a grave insult to all the genuine victims.
It is. That's the whole,
two.
And it's just using it as a prop, right? And it's just deranged and unhinged. And then Lindsey Graham steps in, Danny, and one-ups Netanyahu for an American audience.
That's
because
impressive.
over the weekend, he was asked about Hurricane Helene, which has caused untold damage. Hundreds are dead. Thousands may still be missing. We just don't know. The damage is just incredible. There's another hurricane coming to hit Florida, where Helene also had caused problems, a week or two ago. And over the weekend, when he was being asked about Hurricane Helene, which did a ton of damage and killed many people in his state of South Carolina, he acknowledged it and then quickly pivoted to Israel. Yeah, hurricane's bad, but Israel is where our focus must be. And you heard him in this thing, Senator Graham, again, just disgusting and shamefully saying, don't bother about the hurricane. Hurricanes aren't the real danger here. Iran is the real danger. I mean, why would you?
I've been going all over South Carolina like most people. I hadn't slept much. But look what's going on in Israel. Our friends in Israel surrounded by people that want to kill them, destroy them, a second Holocaust in the making. And Biden says, be proportional. What is the proportional response to people who want to kill you and your family? Gosh. They're running out of ammunition in Israel. We have to help our friends to keep the war over there from coming here.
I was struck by one of the, yeah, exactly. Thank you, Gary. Since we're on the topic of the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who was executed by the Nazis in the last few weeks of the war, his book Ethics, after 10 years, his famous essay, in those he talks about stupidity, and you see this clear with Lindsey Graham. He is a stupid man. And there's no shame or no distaste or no degree of it's okay to use that term. That's how that was the term Bonhoeffer used to describe the Nazis, stupid. And the people who went along with him is stupid. He has a point where he makes about how power relies upon stupidity to further advance itself. Mm-hmm. And you see that with Lindsey Graham, the stupidity of the man, and then the stupidity of the people who say, oh yeah, the hurricane's not that big a deal. We really got to focus on Israel, and this myth in this, this idea that they are, of course, a nation surrounded by subhuman barbarians who want to kill them all. Yes, exactly. That's where our focus should be. I actually just on a point, I don't know if I ever brought this up. I know two people who worked with Lindsey Graham when he would go over to Iraq and Afghanistan, and they all said he was the stupidest person they'd ever worked with. Two separate people, one in Iraq, one in Afghanistan.
Well, so I mean, is it stupid because stupid implies that you don't know any better, or is it just I don't care about death and destruction? I'm cool with it as long as it's somebody else.
I think it's that it's the living in a fantasy world, the living not in reality, the lack of the ability to understand the circumstances and situations as they really exist, as the experience really entails. I think that's what you're dealing with here.
So
he certainly knows how to, because he's not a stupid man in the sense that he can't add 2 + 2. He's not stupid in the sense that he doesn't know how to work the legalized bribery system of the United States. He's not stupid, and he's not so stupid that he can't be the spokesperson for both the Ukraine war and for these wars in the Middle East, as was demonstrated. I mean, he led this delegation to Israel for October 7th for the United States, right? I mean, he's not so stupid that he didn't get himself into that position. But what he embraces and what he espouses and what he offers is stupid. And I go back to Bonhoeffer's use of that term to justify it, because so often I think, Danny, we try and find explanations for things that don't need further explanation than as they present themselves. Like Occam's razor, right? The simplest answer is the most likely answer. And so in this case, I think that is what you have here. You have a man who actually believes these things, believes these fairy tales, the mythologies, believes in the romance of war. And of course, because of the system we have here in the United States, he is then able to become a United States senator because so many interests value that view, value someone who can articulate it so passionately as Lindsey Graham can. And they utilize him and he utilizes them. And this is, I think, this understanding of how the American empire exists and why we have this militarized foreign policy and why we have the wars we have.
And so that's from the legislative branch. I'm going to show you now a clip that's probably by a retired 4-star general, former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. His name is General Orwell, sometimes called Wesley Clark, but he's going to just try to one-up Lindsey Graham. Watch this.
I don't think a strike on their oil is going to spark World War III. I don't think World War III is in the offing right now, but I do say this. Iran is on the verge of having nuclear weapons. Maybe it has them now. When it has those, everything's different. This regime in Iran, it has to go. Now, it can change its tune. If it says, okay, it'll live with its neighbors, fine. If it continues to insist that its whole effort is directed at the destruction of a neighboring state in the 21st century, that's not permitted. So this is a moment for Israel to assert itself, to strike back, and to gain dominance in the region over Iran.
To gain dominance and the nuclear play. We've been throwing this nuclear card out there for decades, and our own CIA keeps saying we don't have any evidence that they're going after a nuclear weapons program. And we had the joint JCPOA, the nuclear deal that came under Obama. Imperfect, but it was very effective at minimizing and making the breakout period of time a lot longer until we sabotaged it and got out of it. Now things are a lot worse here. And listen, Matt, here's what I want you to comment on, because from my perspective, all of these actions, if we actually did want to keep Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, we are doing the exact opposite now and shoving them in a direction to giving them every incentive to make one.
Exactly, Danny. I mean, for decades, the Iranians have said we are not going to have a nuclear weapon. Their supreme leader issued an order, an edict, stating that it was contrary to Islam to possess a weapon of mass destruction like a nuclear weapon. And then in this last year, the Iranians have said we may have to revisit that, right? Because we are pushing them. We are pushing them to find some way to deter the constant attacks, the constant threats, the constant war against their country. And there are many in Iran who disagree with the supreme leader and feel that the correct path for them is to achieve a nuclear weapon so that they can have some balance, some parity, some deterrence with Israel and the United States. And I'll say that's also probably the case for Turkey as well. I believe Turkey in the next 5 to 10 years will get a nuclear weapon for the same reasons. Right now, the Turks are basically unable to do much in the Middle East in opposition to the U.S. For a variety of reasons, but also primarily because Israel has a nuclear weapon, and the Turks don't want to give up Ankara in exchange for trying to do something about Gaza or Beirut. So, yeah, absolutely. Our actions are pushing them, and our actions for decades have pushed hardliners throughout the region to take or to achieve the upper hand in their own domestic politics. It's almost as if Lindsey Graham and his equivalent in Iran, because they have a Lindsey Graham over there, are basically feeding off of each other, basically relying upon one another to advance their interests. So you have certainly in Iran now, you are going to have that video of Lindsey Graham saying those things. You'll have that video of General Wesley Clark saying those things. I did Iranian television last week. One of the reasons being, and I've done it in the past, is because I want to give the Iranian people some degree of perspective on the United States, in the sense that not all of us are Lindsey Graham. Not all of us are Wes Clark. Not all of us are trying to channel the ghost of John McCain. That when you see an American on your television, they don't have to always be offering your country either bombing or surrender, right? Either capitulation or regime change, which is what they get from so many Americans. And so this idea of what are we trying to achieve here? What are we achieving? Yeah, we are doing our best to ensure that Iran has no choice but to pursue a nuclear weapon, which of course falls into the hands of both the Israelis and many Americans. Remember, go back to July, Lindsey Graham, I don't believe it went anyplace, but Lindsey Graham did offer up, put into the Senate an authorization for use of military force against Iran that would allow the president of the United States to conduct military operations against Iran based upon the president's understanding of the Iranian nuclear weapons program. So the Iranians certainly also know that with a certain administration in power, that any move too far towards a nuclear weapons program, again, which they don't have, but anything that kind of looks like that allows for the Israelis and the Americans to say, aha, now we have to bomb you.
Okay, so on that point, now there has been some thus far uncorroborated reports that there was a Richter reading of a apparent earthquake in Iran last week. But according to some analysis, they said that some of the signatures that come from an earthquake are different than the ones that they're indicating could possibly have been an underground nuclear test. Do you have any understanding of that? Because
no,
even if it's claimed, I don't know.
I haven't seen anything. I saw the same reports, but they have plenty of earthquakes in Iran, and I really don't know, Danny. I don't know.
And what worries me is that some maybe want to say, "Oh, yeah, that is what it is. They have one, so we better act quickly." That's one of my concerns about that report. Still uncorroborated, hasn't gotten much notoriety, and I certainly don't have any idea. But I know that that's on the minds of many people.
I think if it was plausible enough for the Israelis and the Americans to say Iran tested a nuclear weapon, they would have said so already. There would have been Lindsey Graham and Netanyahu saying it at this press conference, if not over the weekend. The Iranians tested a nuclear weapon. I think they would have jumped on that already.
Got it.
So, but certainly it's an easy idea to promote, right? And it's an easy lie to peddle. And we've seen plenty of those in our lifetime. So I wouldn't, right? I wouldn't
first.
If that's what leads to it. I mean, my big fear right now, we've talked about this before, is that I think we're okay for the next 30 days or 29 days or whatever, 28 days or whatever we are until election. But once the election's over and there's
wait, safe in what sense? I'm sorry.
Well, I think in a sense of not seeing an Israeli-American attack on Iran, I think we're okay up until the election. And then after the election, I think the White House has a lot more flexibility to do what it wants to do. Certainly the fact that if something will come at some point seems pretty obvious. I mean, General Kurilla, the head of Central Command, has been over there, 3 times in the last 4 weeks now. There's a story in the Jerusalem Post over the weekend that the United States had offered all kinds of inducements to Israel to just bomb Iran the correct way or the right way or the way that we want you to do it, so it doesn't, cause more problems, even though any bombing is going to cause problems. But I think the hesitation on the White House, the fear on the White House is that such a war would have such economic consequences in terms of basically an oil shock, that it would jeopardize the Harris campaign.
We can't have that.
Right. I mean, so
but listen, no,
$8
I don't.
gasoline is going to,
I don't know for sure that we are safe. I'm skeptical that we're safe because there's a lot of hotheads around because I think you can make the argument that from the Israeli perspective is they honestly don't care, because no matter how the election comes out, I mean, my God, Trump was just doing backflips talking about he would bomb Iran anyway.
Right.
So I don't know that they're going to lose. But here's this yesterday from the Secretary of Defense, who said, hey, we're in the region, we're going to go into the with our weapons and stuff. And then he's at the end of this stuff. This is again yesterday. I made it clear that the United States supports Israel's right to defend itself. There's more Orwellian language, meaning that they can do whatever they want militarily, and highlighted the significant capability in place, U.S. capability, to protect U.S. forces supporting Israel's right to defense and deter further escalation. I reinforced that the United States is committed to deterring Iran and Iranian-backed partners and proxies. And I just got to say, Matt, trying to interpret the Orwellian language, which just continues on, that sounds to me like, hey, whatever Israel does, we're going to be there to back them up, like we were the last 2 times, both in April and with the aircraft or the missile boats that were apparently shooting down some missiles. But I'm worried about the time when we say, actually, just instead of shooting stuff down, let's help actually launch things into Iran.
Yeah,
and that's been the unknown part.
Yeah, the easy thing. I mean, I think one of the a key element in this would be, do we provide them with aerial refueling? Right. If they need to have their F-15s and F-35s carry out strikes into Iran or get close enough to launch their cruise missiles, do we provide them with the aerial refueling to do that? Because they would need that. It's about 1,000 miles from, Israel to Iran, roughly. So they would need that type of support. So just kind of one example, which is something we did for the Saudis for many years in Yemen.
Right.
We were providing them with aerial refueling, and we only stopped when the Saudis bought our tankers and could do it themselves. So it wasn't as if there had been a change in the the U.S. administration's feelings towards it. But certainly, I mean, I agree. I think the idea for the White House would be to somehow get the Israelis to launch a strike that doesn't lead to a massive Iranian inaction of resistance retaliation that would then require a massive Israeli-American retaliation, where the White House feels we have to participate because 4,000 Israelis were killed in these missile strikes from Yemen and from Iran and Iraq and Lebanon, etc. Something big like that happens.
Well, that implies, like you said a second ago, that there's a sweet spot where we can have some bombing, and then Iran's going to go, exactly. All right, that's cool. We won't go anything with that. I don't know that such a thing exists right now.
Well, I don't know, but the problem is, Danny, we have people who think it does. We have people who think that this is all manageable, and the best political political benefit can be extracted from it, or the least harmful political benefit can be extracted from it. So I think this is why Kurilla is over there. General Kurilla is over there. Like I said, the article in Jerusalem Post telling the Israelis, we'll send you this, we'll give you this, we'll provide that if you don't hit the oil facilities, if you don't hit the nuclear facilities, if you just kind of limit it to military targets, don't try and kill the supreme leader, and I think they just want to get through these next 4 weeks. And then afterwards, after the election, the White House and the Democratic Party can breathe easier. And, they're willing to at that point, make good on all their assertions that we will always stand with Israel, our ironclad support for Israel. Certainly, if you look at everything coming out of the Harris campaign, if anything, she sounds more hawkish than Joe Biden does in the last couple of months. So there's that. But I think these next 30 days are crucial, because the other part of this is Israel, just as you were saying, who cares what the White House thinks? Israel
Well,
might just
yeah.
do what they
And in
want.
fact, let me show you a couple of things here. This is one of the reasons why I say that there's some hotheads over in Israel, and they may not care about the American election stuff.
And the other point, Danny, is Trump. For many, they view Trump as a better deal, right?
Well, yeah, that's what he
is-
said. He was doing backflips talking about how he would go and attack Iran if he
Right.
were in the White House, and even to the point of saying, "Hey, go after the nuclear facilities. We'll worry about the reactions later."
And there are published reports that one of the quid pro quo with Miriam Adelson to give the Trump campaign $100 million, $200 million, however much it's going to be, is that a Trump administration would allow the Israelis to annex the West Bank. So certainly this might be the October surprise. Netanyahu says, you know what, Biden, I'm done with you in the Democratic Party. I don't need you. And I'm going to do this because so that might be what happens.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see how that part goes. But here's something that is much more current and up to the point here. So over the weekend, Andrea Mitchell was talking, I think it was on NBC News, about how she had been talking with some senior Israeli officials who told her some things that they are, quote, all in. And you can see from her face, she was kind of like, whoa, a little bit alarmed. Watch this exchange.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, and on this he is aligned with his defense minister, unlike Gaza. They are all in. They are all in because Netanyahu believes, and the Israeli officials, senior officials, had said so in New York right after the strike that got Nasrallah, the Hezbollah leader. A senior official saying to some of us that the supreme leader in Iran has a plan to eradicate Israel from the face of the earth by 2040. There is a time clock in his quarters, and they are counting down to it. So they see this as first taking out Hezbollah, the insurance policy that Iran always had as its back, and decimating the leadership, now taking out what they believe, what they said to us are missiles and rockets buried underground in southern Lebanon that was going to be an attack similar to the Hamas attack on October 7th.
Okay, a couple things really jump out at me about this. Number one, the first one to the biggest one, it is an absolute fantasy to say that Iran is going to wipe out Israel by 2040 with what means? And Iran has never said, okay, let me correct myself. They have said they want to wipe Israel off the map, et cetera. That's been a statement for whatever decades, I guess, here. But it all matters about what they can do. And especially this current leadership, the new president has tried to improve relations with people. So instead of even trying to do that, we just have this fiction that they're going to destroy Israel and forget about how. So we have to kill them all now.
Yeah, no, it is. It's this fabulous type thinking. Very similar, right? This comes out of the same playbooks as what we were hearing or have heard in the last couple of years about there'll be war with China by 2027, by 2028, China will invade Taiwan. You know, they put these markers out there. And of course, this is all just playing again upon what we've heard from decades about Iran, right? I mean, it's been more than 25 years since Benjamin Netanyahu stood in the UN with his little graphic of the cannonball with the fuse. And this was supposed to be, Iran was up to here in terms of how far along they have progressed with a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's been, I want to say some point in the 90s, he did that. So this idea of putting this time estimate is done in order to make people feel pressure. It also makes people think that, maybe they actually know what to talk about. There is on the Ayatollahs, on the supreme leader's wall, there's a calendar that's got an X on it on 2040, and that's when they're going to destroy Israel by. As it gets back to what we're talking about with the stupidity of all this. The stupidity of it, like the sheer stupidity of it is fully exposed to all of us. One thing I always like to bring up about Andrea Mitchell, we often talk about the elites and the power structure of the American empire, and sometimes you'll get into how they reinforce themselves. And one of the ways is intermarriage. And if people don't know, Andrea Mitchell, who has been senior foreign correspondent, big deal at NBC News for decades now, she's married to the former Federal Reserve Chair Alan Greenspan. There's a chart. Thank you, Gary. Yeah. I mean, what was the date on that?
Yeah, Gary, I can't read it. It's so small.
Oh, no problem. September 28th, 2012.
Oh, I think he did that before, though. I think there's one before. Yeah.
So,
I feel like this has been going on my entire adult
probably
life.
it's the same chart from the 90s.
It is. He just keeps it. Yeah. I mean, why make another one? It's still good, But essentially, yeah. the fear mongering. But this gets into also too, how do nations get their publics behind war, and how do they sustain support for war? They moralize and they scaremonger, right? So you bring up the Holocaust. You bring up the fact that if we don't fight the Iranians over there, we'll be fighting them here, which is something Lindsey Graham keeps saying. They're saying about Al-Qaeda. They're saying about Islamic State. They're saying about, right, the Russians in Europe in the 1950s and the 1960s and the 1970s. So this the scaremongering, and then the moralizing as well, too. The moralizing that Israel is the only democratic nation in the Middle East, on and on and on.
And it's funny. You mentioned the time and how long Netanyahu's been making these claims, and even the one that Gary just put up on there, that's 12 years ago,
exactly.
and the bomb was right up to the top, and yet that was even before the JCPOA tamped it way down, and before we got rid of that. So it looks like a lot of people actually want war. And if you want to look for somebody who wants it maybe more than Benjamin Netanyahu, it's former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett. Watch what he said.
What we've been doing, I think unwisely, for 30 years was we've been fighting the fingers of this octopus. But the head of the octopus, 1,000 kilometers away from us in Tehran, is laying back, supine, enjoying life, and immune from any danger. Yet they are the ones who are funding, training, arming, and commanding these tentacles to exhaust Israel, to shed our blood. And then I came up with what I call the Octopus Doctrine, or strategy, which essentially says we should try and avoid local tactical skirmishes and redirect our national security energy to weaken Iran and topple that regime.
So topple the regime. I want to take a look at this from a little bit different perspective than the one we've been talking about so far. Let's take the moral part out of it for the moment, because we keep hitting on that, and it's obviously needs to be for up front and center. But let's look at the practical aspects of this, whether it's the stuff Lindsey Graham's talking about, whether it's what Netanyahu's talking about right now, or General Clark, etc. How do they think they can actually accomplish this? Unless you get lucky with a missile strike and you take out Ayatollah, you can't win a war. Israel cannot win a war against Iran. They can fire a bunch of missiles. They can hit a bunch of stuff. They can definitely blow a lot of things up and kill people, as we see in Lebanon. So they can certainly do some of that, though Lebanon has no air defense, and Iran does. So it would be probably somewhat less effective. And Iran can fire back, which Lebanon can't do right now, at least not in any large numbers. But what can they do? Because here's what it looks to me, Matt, and this is what I like your view on. If all of these folks we keep showing here get their way, and we go in and we start firing at Iran, what's the end state? What is the attainable military objective you want to give to your defense security apparatus that he just mentioned there, or that Netanyahu wants to give? What's the end state?
The fantasy is that you are going to do exactly what you just said, Danny, fire a missile there and take out the Iranian leadership, and the whole thing is going to collapse. That this is you're just going to take out the right nodes on the organizational chart, and the whole thing is going to fall apart. Anyone who's ever watched the HBO television series The Wire about cops and crooks in Baltimore know that's a fundamentally flawed premise. You have to get to the root causes. Why do these organizations exist? What is the root cause of the conflict? This idea that we're just going to, first of all, the idea of overthrowing an Iranian government through military force is only possible if you march an army into Iran. Right. And I don't think the Israelis, with their 400,000 man army, three quarters of which are reservists, are going to march through Syria, through Iraq, and into Iran. So the great hope, of course, is that the United States is going to do Iraq war, a redo of Iraq war in Iran. The idea that somehow that just killing figureheads, killing leaders is going to cause a people to give up, when you've seen that throughout history. When you eliminate leadership, new leaders take their place. And very often they can be more aggressive. They can be more dangerous. Go back to the film, the TV show, The Wire. People haven't watched that. It's a brilliant TV show. Go ahead and watch it. But like this idea that somehow by just doing the right high-tech assassination, like something of Tom Clancy or James Bond, that you're going to bring down a government is just pure fantasy. It's the idea you're not even getting out what the issues are here. The issues are occupation. The issues are that the Israelis are occupying the Palestinian lands. The issues are that the Israelis are occupying Syrian land. The issues are that there's part of Lebanon that the Israelis are occupying, Sheba farms. This is the root problem. This is the cause. And unless you address that, you're going to have resistance to Israel's premise. That doesn't even get into other aspects of the right of the return of Palestinian refugees, just making amends and actually acknowledging the crimes of the decades. But, this idea that somehow we just got to kill the right guys, and this because it's all them, that the Lebanese people, the Syrian people, the Iraqi people, the Iranian people, the Palestinians, the Yemenis, they're only being played like puppets by these puppet masters, and we just have to kill the puppet masters. It's just pure fantasy. And so again, you get back to Bonhoeffer's comment about stupidity, and this what Naftali Bennett says there is a fundamentally stupid assertion, just as Andrea Mitchell's comments were fundamentally stupid, and Wesley Clark's, and so on, that when you pull them apart, there is no rationale, there is no logic, there is no evidence to anything that they're saying. And there certainly is nothing to point to that says, hey, this worked in the past, we'll do it again, or any reasonable expectation that what they're offering won't bring anything other than more war, which is what many of these people want. Simply.
Right. But and along those lines. So I'm going to show you in just a second a clip from former CIA director Leon Panetta. Now, in my view, what he's going to just absolutely encapsulate here is one of the absolute fundamental core fatal flaws of American elite thinking right now, in that it never even postulates a then what. Right. What is your next move after that? Watch this and see if you can pick up the obvious question about then what. Here's what he said.
It's not whether we're going to be in a wider war. We are in a wider war right now as we speak. If Iran, in fact, is not moving towards developing a nuclear weapon, then the question becomes, what kind of targets should Israel strike at in Iran? I believe they ought to look seriously at military targets. I think they ought to look at, frankly, some of the energy areas as well as targets. What they have to do in the end is make very clear that Iran is going to be weakened as a result of whatever strike Israel conducts.
Okay, so he just comes out and says weakened. He didn't even say regime change or that's going to win the war. But I'm like, okay, you fired this. You hit every target you just mentioned. And then what? Do you think that Iran's just going to give up? I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
And where does weaken bring you? Are you just going to now? Are you going to have a policy of mowing the grass in Iran for years and decades to come? We've been weakening Ansar Allah, the Yemenis, for 9 months now in the Red Sea. How's that working out?
After the decade of weakening before that.
After a decade of really harsh, brutal, genocidal weakening by the Saudis and the Emiratis against the Yemeni people. Yeah, they starved 400,000 of them to death. And they're still fighting. This idea. So, okay, Leon Panetta, what happens after you weaken them? What A to B to C to what? And the fact that you see so little of that type of comprehension or intellectual honesty about what is being proposed is a great giveaway. It's a great tell that they don't know, that they're only interested in the moment. They're only interested in burnishing the already existing narrative. They're only interested in supporting their own individual and institutional needs and desires, and the politics of it, the 24-hour news cycle and the politics of it is really what we're seeing here determine what our policies are in the Middle East. And it's disastrous.
By the way, Matt, I want to show Gary was just putting up a couple of recent headlines in there that the U.S. and the U.K. are bombing Yemen in support of Israel. Israel is supporting or firing a bunch of missiles into Yemen as well. Just continuing on, literally mowing the grass. But here's another one that I think is maybe more telling. And this one, it didn't get a whole lot of notoriety. It's from the Wall Street Journal, I guess a couple of days ago, where they are saying Israel launches a new offensive in northern Gaza and orders new mass evacuations. The military said 2 of its armored brigades encircled part of Jabalia, a longtime Hamas stronghold, in which it has fought several times over the past year as an infantry division gets ready to go in. This is now that we're seeing it play out that way in Hamas. And you and I have been talking about this literally for months, almost from the outset of this, that Israel has set itself a political objective to destroy Hamas that is militarily unattainable, because all these people that they keep killing civilians wise just generates more fighters against them than ever existed with just Hamas, even before 10/7. And now then it's metastasizing before our eyes. And they're just literally now they're starting back in the north again and trying to go back south while they're still trying to do this fighting in southern Lebanon, while they're still thinking about striking into Iran. It's madness from a military perspective.
It is. The exhaustion of the Israeli army. They were exhausted 2 months ago. They were exhausted a month ago. They were exhausted 6 months ago. You know, they pulled out of parts of Khan Yunis in order to refit, and rest their troops, because this was back in March or so, or February, because they were so exhausted. The condition of their vehicles, their material, everything wears down. As you know, Danny, you were a tanker. You can explain this better than anybody else, how quickly these vehicles wear down. I think people will be shocked. Anyone ever hears that phrase about military grade? They're trying to sell you something. I mean, these vehicles, particularly the more advanced they are, the higher maintenance they require, the more maintenance they require, and wear and tear in combat operations is extremely stressful. And so you just see that example, just their vehicles, they're facing exhaustion. But the idea that somehow they seem to have no end state. And this is something that we have spoken about for a year now. And you have spoken with all the other guests on your channel for. I can't imagine anyone had any different type of crystal ball in front of them in terms of what they were predicting was going to happen if this thing goes this long. And you've seen certainly the politics in Israel, how fractured that is. It was fractured before this, of course, but fractured as it is. But also, too, on top of that, the economic cost, this great bleeding out of the Israeli economy. Tens of thousands of businesses have closed, hundreds of thousands of reservists called up from their jobs, money fleeing Israel, money not going into Israel, tourists not going to Israel. I mean, on and on and on, being downgraded by the credit rating agencies. The only thing really saving them is the United States. And that's all they really matter. That's all that really matters to them. And
well, then that may be all that really matters to them. But let me ask you this in the last few minutes we have here. Where does this go? Not even if, because these things are, Israel is fighting in Yemen. They're fighting in Gaza Strip. They're fighting in the West Bank. They're fighting in Syria. There's been some strikes in Syria. They're fighting, targets even in Iraq, down to Lebanon. And they're now on the verge of adding Iran into that mess. There has to be, and tell me if I'm wrong here, there has to be a militarily achievable task for every single one of those. Otherwise, you literally have open-ended warfare. What is going to happen despite all of the Orwellian claims to the contrary?
I think open-ended warfare is what's going to happen. I think you're going to have this continual process in Gaza of trying to get some type of control, for lack of a better term. I mean, maybe this push by the Israelis that we're seeing now, it's called the General's Plan, to push people out of northern Gaza, south of the Netzarim corridor that the Israelis created, that kind of splits the Gaza Strip. That's their attempt to gain some type of control. I imagine in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, they cause all types of damage, hurt, suffering to the Lebanese people. They try and restrict it to the Shia people. I think what they want ultimately in Lebanon is to cause some type of machination that Lebanon falls back into civil war again, because certainly there are those in Lebanon who have been and are alive with Israel and would like to see a chance to gain the upper hand on Hezbollah. So maybe that, and then the southern part of Lebanon, I think where Israel goes with this, is south. So the area part of the south of the Litani River becomes a free fire zone for the Israelis, and they kill anything they see. They kill anything that moves, which is essentially what they've done in Gaza and what they're moving more towards in the West Bank, where you start to wonder, though, as you look at this, and we had this conversation over the weekend, Danny, you and I, is the feasibility of this. Certainly, they can probably keep going in terms of the wars in Lebanon and Gaza, right? They just need the money. They just need to get onto a good rotation of their troops in and out. They'll bring in some Africans. They'll bring people over from other places to fill out their ranks, and they can sustain what they're doing in Lebanon and Gaza. But the problem, at great cost, though, at a great cost, in the cost that may itself prove to be their undoing. But in terms of war with Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Syria, as you and I were discussing, they're going to run out of missiles. They're going to run out of air defense missiles. We saw that it's likely that, as you were saying to me, and then I found some stuff and I sent it to you, that the production rates for the U.S. for our SM-3 interceptors, so the missiles that our Navy uses to shoot down ballistic missiles, well, our Navy ships fired 12 of them in the attack last week, protecting Israel, our 2 destroyers in the Med. And, the production rates for those SM-3s are 1 or 2 a month.
I was
so
shocked.
They fired off between 6 months or a year's worth of production just in one night on an attack that was essentially a warning to Israel. And in the same issue, there's a lot of concerns in Israel about how many David Sling missiles do we have? How many Arrow interceptors do we have? Because the thing is, maybe the Israelis didn't fire off that many interceptors this last time around because they're just running low on them. And certainly, the idea that Hezbollah, Iran, the Iraqis, the Yemenis, the Syrians have a lot more missiles and they can produce them a lot faster at a lot lower cost, including their hypersonic missiles, than the U.S. and Israel could produce the interceptors. This is the whole folly of missile defense, is that missile defense, it's always behind. It's always behind the offensive weapons. It's always playing catch up. And as soon as it catches up, there's an advancement in the offensive weapons that leaves it all behind. And it's cost prohibitive. The manufacturing is too long. So exactly. So where does this go? This open-ended war. So I think they want to get their political benefit of it. Netanyahu wants to ride on this for months to come. Hopefully they can just keep it as a tit for tat thing. But there is, as you were saying, there's those in Israel who really don't want a full war with Iran and really do want to have this final reckoning. And if nothing else, just to mete out punishment, just to deliver suffering to the Iranian people, because that is very much a part of Israel's military operation, is just to target civilians, just to cause suffering as an end state in its own, as a goal.
I wonder if any of these folks give any thought to what this could mean if we actually do run out of sufficient quantities anyway of these interceptor missiles, things that Israel needs, or you can even throw in some artillery shells in that case too, especially with all the stuff we keep sending to Ukraine during that war, et cetera. But what may be the biggest Achilles heel for Israel overall could be their economy, because it's already been gashed. And you talk about having an open-ended war that doesn't have an end. I mean, they could literally bleed the economy dry, and not to mention all the manpower that they're continuing to have to use on these really intensive operations on the ground in Lebanon, especially. They just look to me like they're setting themselves up for a strategic defeat.
Well, the belief in Israel is that the United States will finance them. And the United States has in the past, up until the early 70s.
Look at that production rate, man. We're not going to be able to help them.
I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the general economy. But they
both.
Yeah. I mean, even if we want to say that statistic is so we can surge, because currently we're producing 1 SM-3 interceptor a month. I don't know how many. I know with the Patriots, there was a big deal several months ago because the Japanese were going to increase their production to help us out on Patriot interceptor missiles, and that increased from 60 to 100. So that increase is something that will get shot off in one night as well. So even if we wanted exactly. So Danny, even if we wanted to increase our production of these things, whether it's THAAD, whether it's Patriot, whether it's SM-3, what have you, how long would it take us to build a factory to do that? and then train the people and everything else. And then at best, what, you're going to double your rate? So you're producing 4 SM-3s a month, right? I mean, how long is that going to last for? And that's actually something I have not heard comments about, actually, is we do have the United States, as far as I know, has only 2 bases in Israel, both pretty small. One of them being a THAAD base. A THAAD is Theater High Altitude Air Defense. This is the system that goes beyond the Patriot. So it's equivalent to the Israeli Arrow systems. These are the missiles that can hit missiles in space, basically. Yeah. And we have a THAAD terminal. We have a THAAD control terminal in Israel. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the base. But what would happen if that was targeted? I mean, that would surely be something that would bring the U.S. into this war if you had a half dozen Americans killed and wounded, or however many, by an Iranian missile strike. So there's all types of other things on top of this that make this, again, incredibly dangerous.
It truly is. I'm going to have to leave it there for right now. I've actually got to go and do a Fox Business News hit real quick. But really, really appreciate this, Matt. This has been a great, great discussion to showing really what's at stake here. And that even if you don't care about the morality of this, just practically speaking, we need to get these wars over with quickly instead of just keeping on with this Orwellian nonsense of just like whatever Israel says we're going to go ahead and do, because that could be the demise of all of us.
Right. I mean, just finally, a week ago, we talked about this last week. A week ago, you had that political article that addressed Brett McGurk and Amos Hochstein, the 2 senior administration officials for the White House, saying that these men, despite saying that we're behind a ceasefire, we're actually privately encouraging the Israelis, telling the Israelis to invade Lebanon, because they believed, Hochstein and McGurk believed, that an Israeli invasion of Lebanon would make the Middle East a better place. It's just how does it? I mean, like, in what? And this is what we're up against. This is what we're up against. People who believe this. Maybe because, getting back to our conversation of stupidity, maybe because they don't know better. Maybe because there is such a bubble in Washington.
That's the scary version.
That this type of conversation, the work you do, the work others do, this type of realist and informed and serious examination of what's occurring is just not allowed in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, it's just not. But we're allowed here, and we're going to continue telling the truth. We're going to continue to remain unintimidated and uncompromised. And speaking of that, we're going to move on to the other issue that this afternoon at 3:00. Zelensky says that we must force peace on Russia, and he has a plan. Does he really? We're going to take a look at that at 3 p.m. You're not going to want to miss that one. Thanks very much. Be sure and like and subscribe if you haven't already. That means more to us than you may realize, and it helps us get this message out to other people. Thanks very much, and we'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.